Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, and I'm here to deliver the news that they have finally done it. The mad geniuses out there have broken the glass ceiling on the N64 Recomp project, and they have released Quest 64 as a recomp that you can play today. And to say that Quest 64 is the best game on Nintendo 64 named Quest 64 would be an understatement. And honestly, even though Quest 64 is definitely a little bit of a meme at this point in time, not only on my channel but in N64 circles in general, we have another recomp out, and I've been hinting at comments lately that you would see another one soon, and this is definitely one of the ones I knew was coming down the pipe. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well, because Brian's a member, shouldn't you be? But in all honesty, Quest 64 definitely hit that meme status, but there is a fun game underneath here. And honestly, this is one that just never actually saw the finish line as far as the development process is concerned, at least if you believe interviews with actual developers back in the day that were working on the project. Quest 64 definitely had promise of being a full 3D RPG on the system, but it kind of felt a little bit empty, a little bit hollow, and a little bit like they had to just basically say, we have no more budget left, we've got a deadline, so we better ship this thing right now and get it onto store shelves. But now as a recomp, you're going to be able to play this thing in 16:9, you're going to be able to get a higher frame rate, and you're just going to have a better Quest 64 experience. And honestly, with mods, if there's ever a game that could be made a lot better as a recomp, Quest 64 would 100% fit that bill. Because that is the reality of all of these recomps and PC ports. They don't just give you a more fluid, better looking experience, but when mod support does come in, people can go in and make these games better. And honestly, even if you are a Quest 64 fan, I'm sure you can admit to yourself and others that there are definite improvements that could come to something like Quest 64. Sure, this isn't Star Fox 64 or any of the other recomps or PC ports we've seen recently, but that is the fun thing about these recomp projects in general. It's basically going to be all-encompassing for almost every single game on the platform. That is just because this actual decomp and toolset here is going to be almost near to universal N64 in the future. Don't think that these projects are free though. Every single decomp, recomp, or PC port takes a lot of time and energy, and you really do have to love the games that you're working on. But because developers are out there making better toolsets to actually accomplish these projects, you're going to see a lot more of them in 2026. There's some that have been announced and people are talking about. There's some that are definitely not mentioned yet that I may know something about, but like everything, if anyone tells me information that they don't want out there, just kind of tuck it under my hat and I tell you guys about it when it's actually made public, because it's one of those things I try to make sure that everyone who puts their trust in me is paid back with me keeping their secrets. But do expect at least one more of these projects maybe in the next month or two, and maybe something extra exciting for you. We'll just have to wait and see. But you'll see here, this is basically using the exact same setup as something like the Star Fox 64 Recomp, and this is definitely still in beta status because this is the first release. But honestly, the only bug I could see here is Brian's hair, when you actually have the frame rate up, does a little bit of weirdness. But honestly, whatever's going on with his hair in the first place is weird, and it's something that if I didn't point out to you, you might not actually notice. But the first thing you're going to see right off the top is a better looking game, a clear looking game, a game in 16:9 with high resolution assets, and definitely something that is running at a much higher native frame rate than the N64 version of the game. And I love that these sheep here can be talked to just like some of the dogs in Mega Man Legends and Mega Man 64. Any game that has animals, if I can talk to them, it's got to be at least one extra point on the Video Game Esoteric review charts. But you'll see here, now that hair is definitely doing some weird things. That's because the frames here are interpolation, because I am assuming that the overall logic in Quest 64 must be tied to the frame rate. And like I said, still in beta status, you are going to see a little bit of graphical weirdness here and there. But I did talk to someone who this is their favorite game, and they said they were like 2/3 of the way through and had been able to play it, save the game, and just continue along with the quests, pun not intended, basically the same way you would on N64. So it is my assumption that you can definitely play this game from start to finish today, but if it freezes in the back third or even in the last 10 minutes, you can't come and yell at me. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, Quest 64 Recomp, big fan, or wondering why they did it. For me, I think everything deserves this, and Quest 64 is a fun game, if a flawed game. But here's how it sounds in the Recomp, 45 seconds, and I'll be right back with a lot more information. I mean, Quest 64 always had a decent soundtrack, and it sounds exceptional coming out of the actual recomp here. But one thing I would love to see in a future version of the game is you'll see that all of the heads-up display is still kind of adhering closer to that 4:3 aspect ratio, because even though the engine can draw 16:9 in the recomp, those assets are still targeting a 4:3 or the old school CRT aspect ratio, and that's something I definitely think would be a small change, but would be for the better. Now don't forget, I've said this many times, recomps and PC ports do not improve the gameplay of a game unless modifications to the actual game are employed. So when you're playing vanilla Quest 64, it's one of those things, if you didn't like the game originally, there's not going to be anything here that convinces you suddenly to play it. The battle system is still the battle system, the story is still the story, the overworld maps and everything else are still going to be identical. But the nice thing about a recomp is, we've seen it in many of them before, you are going to probably get modifications allowable into this, and then maybe people will go in and at least add the French vanilla version of Quest 64, which is a decent ROM hack, which kind of fixes up a lot of the game's problems. And honestly, it's definitely one of those things. There is charm and fun to be had in Quest 64. You just kind of have to hunt around for it a little bit. I don't think I'm saying the game is bad. I'm not. I'm just saying it isn't as good as we would have hoped for. When you compare it against something like Ocarina of Time, another open world RPG on N64, it clearly pales in comparison. But it's just basically day zero stuff. This came out about 12 hours ago, and it's the first thing I'm doing this morning, recording this video before I start packing up more stuff in my studio and bringing it to the new house, because my wife and I are still moving. And of course, there's going to be a metric ton of news this week that I have to talk about in video form, because anytime I try to take a light week because I got something else going on, and is when everything happens all at once. But considering I love some big decomp energy, you know full well I'm going to find time to talk about something like a Quest 64 recomp. And again, I've said this in many videos, I feel like in the next 5 to 10 years, probably like 2035, 2036, you're going to see near to the entire N64 library actually recomped or ported to PC, because the toolset is there, developers are interested in doing this, and they're just having fun with it. And if you did notice there, you still get the fades in 4:3. It seems like the engine is willing to actually render in 16:9, but those fades must be hard-coded in for that square aspect ratio, or close to square at least. So I'm sure in the future that's something that could be adjusted as well, because I'm sure this is going to see a long life getting updates. And if you do want to play around with it, the link to the GitHub is in the description below. You just need to bring your copy of Quest 64 that you definitely own along for the party, so you're doing everything right. But I will say, with this higher resolution in 16:9, I've always thought Quest 64 is a decent looking game, but I would say it definitely jumps up a notch here with a higher resolution on the screen. You tell me what you think down below. All the geometry is pretty basic and not really living up to the level of something like Ocarina of Time, but I remember seeing Quest 64 previewed in magazines back in the day, and the screenshots there really made it look epic. One more soundtrack sample though, because the music in this recomp sounds really good, and I'll be right back to tell you maybe what another recomp might be soon. So a little bit of missing audio there is just kind of the sound in the background looping, and I would say that the looping sound in something like Quest 64 has always had a little bit of a start-stop cadence to it, something that maybe could be addressed in an actual recomp as well. But honestly, this sort of stuff just makes me happy, and it makes everyone happy. Getting different recomps and PC ports of N64 games have been a huge thing in like the last year, and trust me when I say 2026 is going to be no different, and there probably might be something out eventually that is a little bit shooty pew pew. I'll let you guys in the comments down below, but again, I kind of like leaving hints here and there just to see if you guys can figure it out. But whether or not you're a Quest 64 fan or not, having something like this is absolutely outstanding, and it really goes to show that these recomps and PC ports are going to be coming hot and heavy in 2026 and beyond, and it probably is, just like emulation before the future of retro gaming as far as playing these titles are concerned, because with something like this, even if I pop an N64 cartridge into my analog 3D or I load up the ROM on Mr. FPJ, you aren't going to get this level of graphical fidelity, and I know a lot of people like that. You leave me a comment down below and you tell me, did you ever play Quest 64 and what did you think? But short of that, this recomp is out. The link's in the description. I gotta go back to packing and moving, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.